All right, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls from around the world, welcome back to another episode of 99 Pod. It's not 1999 anymore, and believe it's not. So won't y'all like and subscribe to the channel to get all them notifications that we have coming your way, because it's coming your way. Okay, it's going down right now. So let it be written. So let it be done. Lil Shadamas is on the mic. Now, what I want to do here in this particular video is I want to give you my 4 biggest takeaways in the aftermath of Terence Crawford and Errol Spence, right? After that fight, that mega fight that took place last weekend. I'm still trying to process everything that I saw, okay? It's been a lot. I was in shock, kind of. And now here we are. And I already did a reaction video with my full breakdown of the fight and my analysis of the fight. So make sure you lock into that if you really want to see, some, some analyst perspective dig, So the video is going to be in my link description box. Also, you can just look on my page and look for my reactions to the Spence and Crawford fight. But really, as I've gotten to digest a lot of stuff, right? Because when I did my reaction video, it was the day after the fight. So I was pretty much in shock mode. Now I have gotten a whole week to be able to process everything that I saw last week. And I want to give you 4 big takeaways now that Spence and Crawford part 1 potentially, right, is done and in the books. Okay, so that's exactly what I'm going to proceed to do right about now. My first big takeaway, number 1, despite boxing finding its footing in 2023, it may be too late for some hardcore boxing fans, right? The reason why I bring that up, now Spence and Crawford pulled in 650,000 pay-per-view buys. Very good numbers. I can call it a success, but it fell short of my 800K mark, which I predicted, and it fell short of short is an understatement. It fell way short of the $1.2 million pay-per-view buys that Tank and Ryan Garcia did in April. Also, in fact, Jake Paul versus Tommy Fury brought in 830K pay-per-view buys. And we'll find out this week what Jake Paul versus Nate Diaz is pulling in. That crowd looked stacked to me. The energy was crazy in that fight. So I'm guessing that it's going to be a lot of pay-per-view buys, potentially more than Spence and Crawford. Now, the reality is Spence versus Crawford was supposed to be the fight of the decade. So to me, it underperformed from that standpoint, okay? Because yes, we know the result, but we wasn't Nostradamus. I am Nostradamus, but we wasn't Nostradamus. So we didn't know how that fight was going to be one-sided and how lopsided that fight ended up becoming. We should have known prior to the fight that, these are 2 guys at the best of their sport, pound for pound, top 5, fighting against each other. To me, it should have done more than 650K, buys, even though that's not a bad number at all, even though you can call that successful. But it just gives me that reality check that, listen, the hardcore boxing fans like myself, there's not a lot of us left. And even though 2023, the narrative is that boxing is back, is it too late? Because one thing that Tank and Ryan Garcia brought to the table was social media followings. This is the dumbed down culture that we live in, where social media and how you market yourself matters, when the talent should speak more so than anything else that you're bringing to the table, especially in the sport of boxing. That's not the case in today's era. And a lot of people talked about Crawford and his inability to market himself beyond the skills in the ring. And the argument was made that that's why Top Rank was having a hard time delivering Terence Crawford those big fights, because of his inability to market himself beyond the ring. Now, I could see it from that perspective, knowing the facts and knowing, the culture that we are in and what really is bringing in, fans, even if it's not boxing fans, even if it's YouTubers behind the keyboard that want that rah-rah extra stuff to the table. I could understand that with a cognizant knowledge of that. But at the same time, it just shows us that, the social media guys, the guys that are influencers on YouTube. Remember, boxing and YouTube goes hand in hand. we don't see a lot of boxing content on a mainstream level. So your boxing content is coming from the same place that these guys are consuming these, rah-rah stuff, and like YouTube. A lot of guys, a lot of kids are on YouTube, and they are being influenced by influencers, and that's the same station where you get your boxing content. So when you have guys like Jake Paul with a large following on YouTube and he's boxing, well, you got the YouTube algorithms. I mean, the entertainment algorithm, and you got the boxing algorithm. So it just shows me that, yes, and I said it before, that this fight, yeah, you can say it happened on time, but did it really happen at the right time? If that makes sense, where hardcore boxing fans like myself could appreciate the sport. You also got to take in consideration other exterior factors like streaming, right, and pay-per-view costs. It was very expensive, man. Brown was paid $100 to watch a one-sided fight. Okay, maybe narrowing that down to like $60 or $58 or something like that could be useful. So there's a lot of exterior factors, but it just goes to show you that, all right, well, Tommy Fury and Jake Paul did 830. Ain't nobody complaining about streaming then. People are buying that fight, right? Ryan Garcia, Tank, 1.2 million. Ain't nobody talking about streaming then. Guys are buying the pay-per-views, right? Even Wilder and Fury 2, I believe, did more than Spence and Crawford. So that's my big takeaway number one, is that despite boxing finding its footing in 2023, it may be late for some hardcore boxing fans. Guys probably was fed up. It was like, we're not getting the big fights. And now, even though boxing is trending upwards, it may be too late. Number two, my second big takeaway is that Crawford was the better man all along. There's something called a resume, right? And everybody talked about Crawford's resume. But there's also something called the eye test with my own two eyes. Okay? This fighter is the best in the world with my own two eyes. Because despite the resume, I saw him dominate everybody that was put in front of him. And even though Crawford's resume was heavily scrutinized, my own two eyes, it was always to me that Crawford was the best pound for pound fighter in the world. My own two eyes. And Crawford always showed me that he was able to make adjustments, whether it was his switch hitting style, southpaw, orthodox, his counter punching toolbox, his jab, his defensive athleticism. He had more tools in his toolbox, thus his ability to make adjustments. Spence never really had to make adjustments in his previous fights. He was a weight bully, number one. This guy really, to me, is a middleweight at 147, and his pressure and his fundamental jab was able to get the job done all the time. Okay? He was physically stronger than a good amount of his opposition. Unlike, Kell Brook, maybe you could say he was stronger. But yes, he may have been bigger, but listen, he was giving Spence a good fight in the beginning, but Spence really didn't make an adjustment in that fight. He did his game plan better. He just wore Kell Brook down and physically beat him down to the point where he stopped him. It wasn't him really going back in the corner and making an adjustment. It was, all right, we're going to wear him down. Just do our game plan better. And that's exactly what happened. And that's why he won that fight, right? And in this fight against Crawford that took place last week, Crawford was very underratedly strong. And I told my guy Kenny off the air, that a lot of people is underestimating how strong Crawford really is. He's a strong guy. I saw him put down bigger dudes with a jab. This guy was not given credit in those regards. A lot of people just thought that because of the physical attributes that Spence was going to do and dictate and duplicate what he did in previous fights against Crawford. And Crawford wasn't having that. There was times where he pushed him with the shoulder. Get off me, okay? And he neutralized Spence's pressure and Spence's jab by jabbing. Literally, he took away the two things that make Errol Spence out of the game plan. And that's why this fight was so dominating, okay? Crawford didn't have to make any adjustments in this fight. His game plan worked. But Spence needed to make adjustments, and he couldn't bully Crawford Even when he threw the shots to the body to try to slow him down, he couldn't make the adjustments. Him and Derrick James, and really exposed that. So my second big takeaway was that Crawford was the better man all along. And I picked Crawford to win the fight. Obviously, I was correct. And he was just a better fighter all along. My third big takeaway is that, speaking of adjustments, Spence's best adjustment is to not exercise that rematch clause. With all due respect, okay? It's looking likely that Spence is going to exercise that rematch clause, and Crawford is going to agree to do the rematch at 152. Would it do? Okay, fine, right? Fine. But a lot of people are saying that Spence was drained. I'm hearing a lot of excuses. The car flipped over a couple of times, and I understand that may have been the case, that he was drained. Like I said, the guy looked like he smoked a large blunt and all that, but at the same time, that wasn't the reason why he lost. Crawford's skills are superior to Spence. Crawford has so much ways of being adaptive with everything in his toolbox from an offensive and defensive perspective that it didn't matter if Spence was drained or physically at his peak. Okay, Spence took a lot of punishment in the loss to Crawford. Okay, my guy's face was rearranged. My guy looked like Chinese. I almost call him Errol Ling. Okay, he looked like Chinese, my guy, honestly. And I'm not really trying to, make a joke of the situation or offend anybody, but my guy was looking Chinese, okay? And that doesn't include the punishment that he took in and outside the ring previously, before the Crawford fight, with the car accident, with the injury in camp prior to the Manny Pacquiao fight, and why he had to pull out of that fight. He had a serious eye injury and all that. So, no, I don't think Spence should retire. It's not what I'm getting at. I'm not like these hot take clowns on the mic saying that he should retire. I'm hearing a lot of buzz about that. I'm not going to go that far, okay? But he should go down a different path, a different route, which is to build back some wins on his resume and chase a potential fight with Canelo at a catch weight of maybe 165 pounds. That fight would be an even bigger payday. It would do massive numbers. These two guys are draws, big draws in boxing. And it's a more winnable fight for Errol Spence than this Crawford fight. So my third biggest takeaway is that Spence's best adjustment is not exercising that rematch clause. Okay. Now, my final takeaway, my fourth and final takeaway from this big, massive fight that took place, we are in the aftermath, okay, is that we need to stop this father-son, trainer, fighter, doesn't work narrative. I forgot who it was, so don't quote me on it. But I think it was Timothy Bradley. But I'm not sure. I might be wrong. I believe Timothy Bradley put a lid on that father-son, trainer, fighter dynamic, right? And listen, there's always pros and cons to everything. And I think when you talk about the father and son trainer dynamic, there's pros and cons, right? Now, where am I going with this, right? Bo Mack and Crawford, that's not father-son. Derrick James and Spence, that's not father-son. But I'll tell you what, after the fight was over, the lack of consideration that I saw with Derrick James had me appalled. We're talking about a guy in Derrick James who is getting all the accolades right now, won Coach of the Year. He has Anthony Joshua, Ryan Garcia, Charlo, Martin, Spence in his camp, and he's on top of the world right now as being the premier trainer in boxing right now, right? Cool. But number one, a father would have stopped that fight. Okay, would have saw his fighter getting demolished. And don't get me wrong, Spence tried. He showed me a few things at various times when he, committed to trying to walk Crawford down, even though that was unsuccessful. Trying to throw them body shots, I get it. But what he was collecting in the process, okay, of trying to come forward by taking all that punishment to show that he still has something left, a father would have stopped that. A father would have looked out in the best interest of the fighter right there in that situation. Or a guy, I'm not sure if Derrick James has any kids or not, right? I don't know. But a guy that has a kid, even if Spence wasn't his son, would have looked from that perspective and that lens of having a child and would have stopped that. And he was asked, did it cross his mind to stop it? And clearly it wasn't in his mind to stop it, because he's so synchronized in his own ego, by making things personal with, I'm about to say Bromac, but Bomac, when they was at the weigh-in and they was talking the most smack out of everybody here. Not Spence and Crawford. They wasn't with the rah-rah. They showed each other massive respect. But it was these two trainers talking all that yin yang yo, and Bomac got the last laugh, and he took it personal. Okay, even if you watch and go back and watch that video where Crawford went up to Errol Spence and kind of, after the fight was over, after he defeated him, he tried to, console him a little bit. Yo, you a great fighter, da-da-da. And look at Derrick James' face in that video. My guy had the meanest face ever. Like, you can read that. Certain body language, you can read what that person is saying, right? Without even being able to read it. And that was one of the more inconsiderate things I've ever seen in the sport of boxing right there. Okay, a trainer more concerned with himself than the fighter's protection, living to see another day, knowing that, or should be knowing that you have the rematch clause, and it's just not Spence night. That was evident. You never saw Spence get beat up like this before. So it was clear that it wasn't his night, right? Maybe you want to throw in the exterior factors and excuses that a lot of people has been throwing. Fine, cool. But he was getting dominated, okay, in the ring. So it wasn't his night. He should have stopped that fight earlier. Okay, when you want to make a comparison, right? I'll give you another example. And Sean Porter recently was on his podcast and talking about, the situation when he fought Terence Crawford and his father stopping that fight. That was very controversial. But even though, maybe they was not on the same page from a communication standpoint in that matter, Kenny Porter saw enough. He was like, I'm not trying to get my fighter hurt, my son hurt, because that was his son. His father is his trainer, right? So we need to stop that narrative. Look, Teofimo Lopez and his father, okay, they just beat Josh Taylor. And they cooked up a good game plan, and they dominated that fight. Ain't nobody talking about that now. Okay, ain't nobody talking about that. And a lot of people was criticizing Teofimo Lopez when he had those, L's in between, with the Cambosos, and I would say an L. He had one loss, but, arguably he lost the tune-up fight before this fight against Sandor Martin to me, but neither here or there. You saw it worked against Loma. It worked against Josh Taylor. So we need to stop that father and son, trainer, fighter doesn't work. It's pros and cons just like everything. But I can tell you one thing, okay? A father is stopping that fight last week when he's seeing his fighter getting blasted. It's not going to be synchronized in his own ego and caring about himself. And I'm sorry I got to put Derrick James, to the forefront like that. But it is what it is. I'm just speaking the truth. That's my name, Real Leel. So those are my 4 biggest takeaways in the aftermath of Terence Crawford and Errol Spence. Okay, to recap it. Number 1, it may be too late for boxing fans, hardcore boxing fans, to save the sport of boxing. Number 2, Crawford was the better man all along. Number 3, Spence's best adjustment is to not invoke the rematch clause. And number 4, stop the father-son, trainer-fighter doesn't work narrative. I'm your boy, Lil Shadamas. Make sure you like and subscribe to the channel to get them notifications we have coming your way. And once again, till the next time, peace out. Peace.